Donald Trump, who was apparently very happy with Rudy Giuliani abruptly revealing what they had all been denying for months at this point, then tweeted this. And let's see how likely it is that Trump himself was actually the person tweeting this. Mr. Cohen, an attorney, received a monthly retainer, not from the campaign and having nothing to do with the campaign, from which he entered into, through reimbursement, a private contract between two parties known as a non-disclosure agreement, or NDA. Somebody pointed out he apparently has like a term of the day calendar. These agreements are very common among celebrities and people of wealth, also Donald Trump. In this case, it is in full force and effect and will be used in arbitration for damages against Ms. Clifford's. The agreement was used to stop the false and extortionist accusations made by her about an affair, despite already having signed a detailed letter admitting that there was no affair. Prior to its violation by Mrs. Clifford and her attorney, this was a private agreement. Money from the campaign or campaign contributions played no role in this transaction. Now, they're focusing a lot on this NDA that Donald Trump has until recently known nothing about, if you believe what he said. So somehow this entire thing was crafted and paid for without any of his knowledge whatsoever. And that's incredibly important because all of this was going on in the immediate run up to the election, where any sort of payment like this would be an in-kind contribution to his campaign and would be a violation of campaign finance laws. The few laws we actually have in this country that mandate how much you can actually spend. Also, by the way, and this is just sort of a tangential thing, he's being sued by Stormy Daniels and her lawyer for defamation. For defamation. And apparently, I haven't been following that case very closely, but apparently up until now, it's been sort of like, hasn't really talked about her too much. So the idea that he's defaming her was a little bit hard to prove. But right there, he attacks her multiple times in a very clear way. So while he's trying to defend himself from the Michael Cohen thing, he might have been making this part worse for himself as well legally.
Yeah, I mean, this guy, it is lies, lies, lies. And as you say, for a guy who knows nothing, as he was confronted by the press on the plane about the $130,000, he said, I don't know anything. And then you saw in those tweets that John just read, he knows everything. I mean, down to sort of granular specifics. And then as John says, he mentions her by name. So there could be a defamatory aspect to this. There are all sorts of issues here. And I'm so glad that Jayar mentioned the dustiness and just kicking up dust to make this investigation so cloudy that one begins to lose track of fact. That's deliberate. And the idea here, and Giuliani was part of it, even though he did it clumsily, the idea was to go on a media jihad for Trump, to begin to dirty up this investigation and try to clear the name of Trump in any way possible. And that's what Rudy is out there doing. And that's what they're all doing. In fact, this new defense team for Trump is going to do that more. They're going to fight the political fight, even as they fight the legal fight on the side. That way, they don't have to deal with as many facts.
Also, for one of the reasons I find this to be interesting is Rudy Giuliani and others are saying that Cohen didn't do anything, Trump didn't do anything. But in fact, the person who should be investigated are all of the investigators in this matter, because what they're doing in relation to Michael Cohen is illegal and immoral and all of that. They keep attacking that and all of that. But here's the thing, they're investigating Michael Cohen for good reason, and the reasons keep getting better every day. If he is saying that he wasn't repaid, and he said that multiple times, although we now find out that he has been being repaid month after month until eventually it was all repaid, why is he lying about that? What possible explanation could there be for that? And Rudy Giuliani actually doesn't have a good response to that. If we could go to video 7, actually, you're gonna see Giuliani attempting to cover for that obvious follow-up to what he had revealed on Hannity's show.
Something that did stand out to me, I remember when Michael Cohen was interviewed about it, and it seemed like he was saying that he was never reimbursed that $130,000, and now it sounds like the story's changing.
Well, he was definitely reimbursed. There's no doubt about it.
So why did he say he wasn't?
Maybe. First of all, if we had to defend this as not being a campaign contribution, I think we could do that. This was for personal reasons. This was the president had been hurt personally, not politically, personally so much, and the first lady by some of the false allegations. That one more false allegation, right. 6 years old. I think he was trying to help the family, and for that, the man is being treated like some kind of villain, and I think he was just being a good lawyer and a good man.
There's no explanation there as to why he would have lied about that. And also, if he was just helping him out of the goodness of his heart, has nothing to do with the campaign, why was he paid back at all? If he was just helping him out, that seems a little bit odd.
Or was he paid back?
Or was he paid back? I mean, who knows? And here's the thing, that is important because as you alluded to, there are potential, that could have been illegal as well. Former President Obama ethics chief Norm Eisen is, and by the way, he's just one of many saying this. The revelation that the president repaid Michael Cohen may prove that Trump broke the law by failing to disclose the loan from Cohen on his federal presidential financial disclosures. So, look, if it was about the campaign, or if he didn't pay him back, then Michael Cohen likely broke campaign finance laws. If it wasn't about the campaign and Trump did pay him back, then it looks like Trump violated laws having to do with financial disclosures.
And that,
so they really have to choose their poison here.
Yeah, but you saw Giuliani default to that there was no problem with campaign contributions being used to pay Michael Cohen. You see him default to that position. They want to claim that high legal ground. But as you said, John, there are other areas of the law that are clearly running afoul of. And so I don't know how they put out all these fires. So that's why I say they're just really waging a public media campaign now. They're really just trying to win the sentiments of the public, such that the drumbeat of end this investigation gets so loud that something has to be done, or you undercut the results of the investigation.
One of the things he's attacking is the legitimacy of the entire investigation. He said this: the basis of the case is dead. Sessions should step in and close it. There's been too much government misconduct. The crimes now have all been committed by the government and their agents, not by any of the almost 24 people that have been indicted or several that have already pled guilty to charges coming out of the investigation. Not them, just the government agents. And we're hearing this more and more every day.
Exactly, and there it is, government misconduct. I said government overreach before, but he's suggesting specifically those investigators have their own political agenda, which is bizarre also, since they're GOP appointed. So none of this stuff passes the smell test, but it is part, as you say, of a media blitz, and it is going to continue.
2 easy ways to follow the Young Turks. One is hit the subscribe button down below, then you're a TYT subscriber. And second is ring the bell. And when you do that on YouTube, you're notified of our videos.